Hello, everybody. Hi, welcome to Nerd Nite. Hey, nice to see everyone. Hi. All right, lights, camera. I'm talking. It's happening. The action. It's going. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I work at the Ann Arbor District Library, and it's my pleasure to help coordinate Nerd Nite Ann Arbor and bring this awesome event here to you. So thank you all for coming out. This is our return to Thursday nights. In the old days, pre-pandemic, when we were young and beautiful, you remember those carefree, glorious days? We were different people, better people, perhaps, but different people. And we were always on Thursdays. And then we came back slow and found our way back. And now we are back at live, our home base. We are back on Thursdays, our home time. It's all starting to feel familiar again. So thanks for coming out tonight and joining us. We're glad to have you. All right. We have a great show for you tonight. I'm very excited about our presenters. So first, before we get into who they are and their areas of expertise, I'm going to give you a little background on what Nerd Nite is. And it all happened back in 2003. So, do your Wayback Machine in your brain to take you back to a little place called the Midway in Boston. This is Chris. Chris is an evolutionary biologist, and he's studying, and he goes out of his, he does a field research every year. He goes to Cameroon, and he researches this very, very interesting bird. He researches, there's Cameroon, see, proof. He researches the indigo bird. Look how cute this bird is. See his little footsers? He's such a cute baby. But it turns out he was not actually a cute baby. He's a jerk bird. The technical term is jerk bird. This bird lays its eggs in another bird's nest. And then when those little jerk birds hatch, they know deep inside their core that they are jerks. And they murder the birds who belong in the nest, and they push them out of the nest. But the nice bird mommies and daddies are dumb, and they just raise the jerk up, and the jerk bird persists and wins all the time, and it goes on. The cycle continues. It's horrible. But for Chris, he's like, fascinating. Loves it. So he comes home from Jerkbird Central every year, and he goes to his favorite bar, the Midway, and he's like, hey, man, guess what? I studied this awesome bird, and he tells the whole story. And then he does it again the next night, and then he does it in a week, and then he does it next Thursday, and then he does it all the fucking time. So it goes on and on and on and on until the bartender is like, Chris, you can't tell this story anymore. I know the story now. I've heard it enough. We don't want to hear about the Jerkbird. How about this? How about you get all your friends together and you tell it one last time, a last hurrah for your stupid Jerkbird story. How about that? And Chris is like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. And they did. And it was so successful. They're like, what are we going to do next month? And that was the first Nerd Nite. Now they're everywhere. So it just goes to show, if you tell the same story enough times, it becomes lore, it becomes canon, it becomes the origin story, and it brings nerds together across the world. And that's why we tell this story every time. Never give up on your lame stories, guys. Somebody wants to hear it. I do. All right. So they're all over the world, and they're here tonight. And it couldn't be here tonight without the sponsorship of the Ann Arbor District Library, your friendly neighborhood library. Yay, the library. It wouldn't be here specifically without Live. So huge thanks to Live and Mike behind the bar. Woo! And then thank you all for showing up, and a huge thanks to the nerds who are going to get up on the stage and share their stories with you tonight. And I know you're going to be a lovely, supportive audience who only heckles in the gentlest and kindest ways and laughs extra hard at any jokes. And I know you're going to do that because you're a Nerd Nite audience. And I know that a Nerd Nite audience is a nice bird family and not a jerk bird family, because I know you deep in your core. All right. So tonight we've got Greg Selduti Jr. He will be telling us about geolocation. We've got Achala Chator. She's going to teach you about how germs are the most terrifying thing in the world. And we're going to have Sexton himself, Leif LaFayerson, and he is going to give us a little tour through burial history and graveyards and cemeteries of yore. And it's going to be great. So we have amazing speakers. And our very first one is Greg Selduti. He is a geographer. He is a bike rider. He is a computer nerd. And he's gotten where he is today by being very good at Google searches. He's better than you at them. And he's going to prove it right now. Greg, come on down.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Sarah, for hosting, and again to the district library and to Live, of course. How's that? Cool. Yeah, my name is Greg Salduti. Thanks for having me. Thanks for accepting my speech. And I'm going to be talking about geolocation tonight. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about geolocating images. And I'll explain geolocation in a minute. But first, about me, I'm a geographer. I'm a data person. I'm a cartographer. Believe it or not, they still exist. People still make maps. I hope there's some Arrested Development fans because they've done a pretty good job mapping the world, but we still make them. And nowadays it's mostly digital, and it's got a lot more to do with data. And what I'm going to be talking about is sort of adjacent to map making and data analysis. And that is geolocation. Luckily, the word sort of explains itself. Geolocation is finding some place, finding some event, finding some person. In the digital age, we often think about it in terms of devices. And so that can be anything from an IP address, your cell phone. We all are being geolocated all the time. But it's sort of a proxy, right? Even when you take a digital image, the metadata could contain coordinates of that image, and you can use and you can find where an image was taken by looking in the metadata of the image. But the form of data that I'm going to be talking about is visual data. And so visual data is basically looking at an image and finding clues in the image and then Google searching the rest of the way to figure out where an image was taken. And in order to do that, I need to sort of explain another concept. It's a concept of open source intelligence to inform and investigate. Words, public documents, social media, believe it or not, has a lot of information about you. And the king of them all, Google, or DuckDuckGo if you prefer more privacy. But because often when you're geolocating an image, you need to the image isn't enough. You need to have sort of an iteration of narrowing down places, possibilities, and you do that using open data. And it's funny because there's a game called GeoGuessr, and it's basically based on geolocation. And what it does is it throws you somewhere on Google Street View, and the goal is to find out where you are in as short a time as possible, right? So you can click around, you can look at signs, whatever, but the goal is to pinpoint where you are. And I overheard a conversation about this game a couple months ago. And somebody said, yeah, it's fun, it's great, but like, when do you ever need to be able to do that? But geolocation and open source investigations are actually really important. And I want to talk about two reasons or highlight two reasons. First is for digital verification. So like everything we do now, everything online has got images attached to it. But how do we know that those images are real? I don't know if you guys have heard about AI, but now they can make fake images and yeah, and photos are such a large part of like the media landscape. If anybody's ever seen like the New York Times through the years, how it just becomes all photo. So it's very important to know like that the photo that you're seeing is actually representing the thing that it says it is. And this is one way of doing that. And it also is used to like catch and implicate bad guys if you can't necessarily catch them. And of course, that's very important. It's in a very important job, and it doesn't always end up catching anybody, but it's still important to pull back the covers. So who uses OSINT? Journalists use this a lot. Banks use this for fraud investigations, for anti-money laundering investigations. Intelligence agencies use this. Other bad guys like hackers use this to find information about us innocent people. NGOs use this a lot to inform their own human rights investigations, and law enforcement uses this as well. And so, like the two on the end, right? They use these techniques, but they also have access to other data that we might not be able to. But they still use yeah, again, social media. And some notable examples. So January 6th, a lot of the cases were built off not just cell records, but also social media evidence, which was out there for everybody to see, including the FBI. If anybody knows the shooting down of Malaysian airline flight over Ukraine in 2014, so the guys that did an investigation of this event basically tracked back the missile system that shot the plane down, and they found the satellite images of the field in Ukraine where it was shot down from, and evidence of the launch and everything. In the invasion of Ukraine last year, there was suddenly a traffic jam in rural Belarus at 2 a.m. And so a lot of sleuths sort of figured that something was up. And in fact, it was the Russian military about to invade Ukraine. And during the George Floyd protests, there was obviously a lot of misinformation going around. For example, there were a lot of stories about bricks being left. Some journalists went through those and sort of pieced through public records about construction going on, and were able to, I guess, verify, or in this case, prove that these were where they should have been when they should have been. But how do you do it? So this is the practical part, because geolocation as a concept is pretty straightforward. Yeah, how do you do it? So you can look at landmarks or architecture. So for example, here we've got some Chinese script, but if you look at the buildings, that's North American. And in fact, if you can notice the license plate, that's in New York. So it's important to take a lot of these elements in. Landscapes can often give away, like this all helps you narrow down where you should look. Signage and language helps. If you notice, there's some Latin script on the sign on the right there, and Cyrillic on the sign on the left. And this photo is actually from Serbia, where they use both. So that's also a clue. Road design. If you notice these squiggly lines, and I think that's pretty maybe unique for the UK, if not Europe. That's also a clue. Weapon systems. So this is used a lot in terms of monitoring conflict, and it's a whole nother realm of not useless information, but definitely specific information. And also just people. What are they doing? What are they wearing? What do they look like? Bikes. So, and bike lanes. So maybe places that like to bike. So I also now have some examples that I've done myself. There is a Twitter account that actually every day they post challenges for people to just do this yourself. And there's always help. There's always people on the thread that chime in and will sort of work together to solve it. And some of them are actually pretty impressive when people do it. This one's pretty straightforward, but you can see there's a couple questions. So where is this? And it's on March 14th. So what's the event? So, looking at some of the elements in this image, it's urban. There's kind of a mix of new and less new buildings. Luckily, we have a sign here. It's in March, and we can also tell by the angle of the sun that it's not really at a southern latitude. It's maybe a little more middling, and a couple other clues. If it's based on the direction of the sun, we can guess that maybe these people are this way is south, so we're looking east-west down this road. So just some things to look out for. I went ahead and Googled this. Albanian was detected. This confirmed some of my prior gut instinct about this image. And we also have a street sign, luckily. So game over. Google brings us here if we look up that street. It's in Albania. And then the next thing to do is just, luckily it's not a very long street, so we go up and down and find the street view image of the same image. And if anybody wants to figure out what they were doing on March 14th, that's a little audience participation. So feel free to do that at the break. But we don't always have such easy clues, right? We don't always have street signs or font to look at or text to look at. And so here's another from the same guy from the same account. This image was taken on April 20th. It looks like it's European time, so I'll assume this is in Europe somewhere. But there's another question that I'm not going to worry about that because I didn't do that part. But all we really have to look at is beach, the ocean or the sea, and sort of a maybe something in the distance there. This is it blown up. But these are some of the elements that I'm going to use to like start to inform this investigation. So on the top here, we have windmills. On the left, I think that's a port, right? We're by the ocean. There's some ship traffic. So I think it's a port. And also down here, if we go back to this big one, we can see this guy and we can see his shadow, right? And he's sort of walking, I would say, parallel to this coastline here. And on top of that, it looks like we're looking across another like maybe canal or river or something here. But we have his shadow here, and we know what day and what time this photo was taken at. So there are actually more tools online where we can say, okay, the date and the time, tell me where the sun is at this date and time in this location. So because it's Europe, or I think it's Europe because it's Central European time, I'll go to sort of Northern Europe on the coast here, and I'll put the sun down, and it looks like this guy's walking parallel to the coastline. If the sun is in this position at that time, and his back is to the sun, then he's roughly walking in this direction. So where on the coast where do we find, like, along the coast, that configuration of coastline, right? But further, we have these elements too. So there's another OpenStreetMaps, if anybody's familiar. It's basically an open database of it's like Google Maps, but it's anybody can put data there. So there's an interface for OpenStreetMaps that allows you to basically say, okay, OpenStreetMaps, give me all of the wind turbines within 5 kilometers of ports in this area. And that's what this is here. So I searched for wind turbines within 5 kilometers of a port and got these results. So already we can start to narrow some of these places down because, again, I'm assuming this is along the coast, right? So there's only a few places along the coast here in the Netherlands and up there in the northern Netherlands. And on top of that, it looks like we're looking again across like a stretch of water. So we've got the coast to the left here, and then maybe looking across a stretch of water. And so from these locations, I went through and I picked out 2 using the satellite imagery where we might get this configuration, right? The coast to our left, we're looking across a stretch of water to a port facility. It could be up here, right? But none of these wind turbines are across that stretch of water. So that's why I ruled that out. But I like this location and I like this location down here the best. So I'll start with those. This location is the one further north. You see that we're sort of looking across some water here, and according to OpenStreetMaps, there's some wind turbines in a port here, and that one's the one further south. Again, sort of the same configuration, but already when we zoom in, I like that coastline there because it's in the direction of the sun when we went through and looked at the position of the sun. So I'll go there. Again, I'll go to Google Street View. This is all the places I can look. I'll look for my wind turbines. There's also this like pretty distinct. I don't know if that's I don't know if it's a landfill or something, but whatever. There's all the way over to the right there. We'll go on Google Street View, click around for a while, and we'll find the same location for the same spot. So that's it. Oh yeah, if anybody has any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So you had mentioned geolocation being used to identify people and where people are. Are you personally working on ways to eliminate racial bias with those image detections?
Oh no, so this is so. Oh yeah, sorry. She asked if I'm personally working to like combat racial biases, and so I think what you're referring to is like in AI detection and facial detection, right? So at least is that correct? Yeah. So in the way that I'm doing it, it's really just me looking at a photo and trying to locate where it is. So there's no sorry. Well, yeah, not necessarily, or it's not running through through an algorithm other than me, but I'm not an algorithm, and then I just convert it into where is this street. So no, and not in that sense.
Did you possibly start using AI to locate places?
Yeah, so could you use AI to locate photos? Yeah, actually, something that I didn't include was that there's already something called reverse image search, and there's Google has one. I think all the search engines have one. And if you're lucky enough, you can put in a photo, and if you crop it right, you can put in a photo, and it might return a result if you have like a pretty distinct piece of architecture or landscape. So it's definitely like one of the first resources you could try. Definitely, yeah. Do you get hired to do this? Yes, I did not get hired to do this. I do this for fun. But people do get hired to do this. And like I said, law enforcement, banks, yeah, human rights organizations, journalists all the time. Yeah. To do like, I don't know if, I guess it would be more of like, you'd be like an investigator, right? A geolocator role is maybe very specific, but within the broader ecosystem, yeah.
I've heard people complain that Google's getting worse because of like search engine optimization. Have you found that to be the case?
No, only because there's definitely a trick to like format it, like formatting your searches. And with search engine optimization, I think that's more of a challenge on the part of somebody who wants their content to be displayed. But yeah, there are a lot of like very detailed ways to search in Google, and that will allow you to get the results that you want. You can search, for example, if you put like site and then the site and then quote a line of text, it will search just that site. So if you encounter a website that has a terrible search feature, use Google, use site, website, and then search, and Google will probably do a better job of it. And right, yeah. So there's lots of ways to. Right. Right. Same with Reddit.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have a GeoGuessr best time? Do you do GeoGuessr?
I don't, because I think you have to pay for it.
Oh, you do?
Oh, do you have a GeoGuessr best time? So GeoGuessr is this game that basically makes you do this. It puts you on Street View, and it says find where you are and do it quickly. Oh, I don't know. It's pretty. Yes, it's pretty amazing to watch the people do it. But no, I don't do it that much. But I do quiz time at quiz time. If anybody's on Twitter, is the bot that posts challenges every day, and they're pretty fun. So
I think we had one more question somewhere here, and this will be our last one.
oh, it depends. Oh, sorry. The average amount of time that you spend in doing these.
Have you ever crushed it? Have you ever just gotten it
Right away.
close, like in 5 minutes?
Well, the first example was pretty easy.
It was.
Yeah, that was less than 5 minutes, I think. The longest it took me, days.
Really?
Yeah. It depends. We'll say that. It depends how lucky you are. Yeah. Sorry, one more.
Ooh.
My most clever trick. Yeah, I don't know. I guess one of the clever tricks, although I don't know if it's like it's definitely not secret knowledge, but reverse image search. Sometimes if you put it in reverse image search, it'll come up right away, and then it's less than 2 minutes. Then it's like 5 seconds. Well, in GeoGuessr, it's cheating. Yeah.
What would be an example of reverse image search?
So reverse image search is like a Google search, but you're giving it a photo, and then it gives you its best guesses as to where that is. So if you put in Statue of Liberty, if you put a photo of the Statue of Liberty into a reverse image search, it would probably come up with the Statue of Liberty because it's such a well-known photo. But the more, yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. All right. So I was tempted when Greg was coming up or when he was exiting to ask our IT guy or our tech guy, Ben, to play the theme song in the world is Carmen Sandiego. Would anyone have known it? Okay. All right. Great. Well, I might ask for that now. But I was like, no, it's a 90s kid. No one will appreciate it. And also, like, I don't really want to talk about how much I used to love a cappella, but I did. And you can't hide from who you are. You can just move forward and be better. All right, folks. Thank you so much to Greg. Thanks for this great talk and great questions. And we are going to take a quick break. And then when we're back, we'll be hearing from Chala Chator. See you in a minute.
Yes, I think this is on. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm also a staff member at the Ann Arbor District Library, and we're going to bring it back for our second Nerd Night speaker here. Her name is Achala Chator, and I think Sarah described her talk as talking about scary germs. I don't have much to add there. Achala is a postdoc at the University of Michigan in the Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology Department, a lot of syllables there. She grew up in Portland, Oregon, and received her bachelor's at Williams College and earned a PhD from Harvard. And again, Achala will be talking about how disease-causing bacteria can modify their trash chutes to expel antibiotics. It's very, very scary stuff. Thank you. Take it away, Achala.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to be telling you today how germs live to fight another day. So I want to start by asking you all a question. Can you raise your hand if you've ever gotten a cut and put some like Neosporin on it? Okay. Put your hands down. Now raise your hand if you've ever taken antibiotics for like a sinus infection, pneumonia, skin infection. Great. So this is a pretty common experience, right? And this is because germs are everywhere. And today I'm specifically talking about germs called bacteria. So germs are microorganisms, in this case, single-celled bacteria that are the size of micrometers. So on this kind of crude, sense of scale, you can see that from, the size of a baseball bat down to the size of atoms, bacteria are somewhere in the middle. They're about 1/10 of the width of a human hair. So very small. And you might think, well, why do I have to worry about these like tiny organisms? They don't do anything. No, they have power in numbers. They are everywhere and they are in your body. They are on your body. They do a lot of great things for our health, right? You might think of the gut microbiome, the skin microbiome, but put a bacteria that's not supposed to be there in the wrong place at the wrong time, it starts multiplying and you have a pretty serious situation on your hands. And this is when, especially if our immune systems can't clear bacteria properly, or you have like a wound and you want to prevent bacteria from growing there, we really rely on antiseptics and antibiotics to be able to manage and control infections and disease. And so this works most of the time, right? All of us have taken antibiotics, they've worked. But what happens when they don't work? And this is actually happening more and more, which is kind of terrifying. So antibiotic resistance is a growing public health threat. And bacteria are not only becoming resistant to one antibiotic, but now there are bacteria that are resistant to multiple antibiotics. And this is because the more that we use antibiotics, the more bacteria can adapt and learn and figure out how to become resistant to them. And they are kind of doing this at a faster pace than we can come up with new antibiotics. And so this is kind of scary. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria kill over 1.3 million people per year worldwide, and this number is only growing. And, when you look at things like the CDC report, it tends to look at more of the public health aspect of this, which is trying to manage spread of bacteria that are already resistant to antibiotics in the community, in the environment, in healthcare systems. And that's all well and good, but my part of this story is actually one step farther back. So instead of thinking about the spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, I want you to think about how those bacteria actually became resistant in the first place. Bacteria are ancient organisms. They've been on this planet for billions of years. And so they've been going about their business well before we started using our antibiotics. And so this is a relatively recent challenge that bacteria have had to face and overcome, and they're doing it fairly well. And so what can we learn about how bacteria actually overcoming this challenge of antibiotics and how they're actually becoming resistant? So to do this, I want you to all imagine you are a bacterium. We're really going to be immersive in this process. And so this is you inside of a human body, and you've found this nice little home for yourself. It's nice and warm and safe, and you're protected. It's full of nutrients. You're with all your friends, your siblings, because you're growing bacteria can divide like as fast as every 30 minutes. So there are tons of you, and you're basically all genetically identical. And so you're having a great time. But then everyone around you starts dying, and they've been poisoned because the human that you are in is taking antibiotics. So what do you do as a bacterium, and how do you face this challenge? Well, you might think,
okay, how do I get rid of this poison that is threatening my life? Maybe I can detox it. Well, they can't do like a juice cleanse detox, but maybe they can try to take out the trash. This is something that we as people do all the time, and actually bacteria do this as well. And so there are kind of two kinds of waste that bacteria have to deal with. One type would be self-generated waste. You can think of this as like food scraps in your kitchen. Bacteria also have ways to, generate energy from nutrients. These metabolic processes can basically create unwanted waste that they then have to get rid of from their cell. And then you also have environmental waste. So this is things like maybe dirt that you would track in on your shoe into your house, and now you have to sweep it up and get rid of it. So for bacteria, that might be like heavy metals in the environment that kind of slowly leach into the cell and then build up and become toxic. And now the bacteria has to get rid of it. And so what do we mean when we're saying getting rid of something from inside of the cell? So bacteria are just a single cell. And what's basically separating the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell is this greasy barrier that's outlining the cell called the cell membrane. And so this mostly prevents molecules from moving back and forth. It keeps all the good stuff in the cell inside the cell, keeps everything else outside. But in times like this with the trash, where you have to be able to move things from inside of the cell back out into the environment to keep yourself safe, you need something called a transporter. So bacteria have different small machines called proteins that are basically littered around the cell and do different kinds of jobs. And so the one we're going to be talking about today is called a transporter protein. This is a very specialized gatekeeper that basically sits in this greasy barrier, and it specifically allows only certain things to cross and not other things, and keeps this barrier intact while doing that. So this is a very important function. And this transporter can actually seek out these specific types of waste that we mentioned and pull them from inside of the cell and shoot them out into the environment. This is kind of like the airlock of a spaceship. And so it's not destroying or impacting that integrity of the barrier, but it's allowing very specific molecules to move from the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. Okay, great. So you might be thinking, as a bacteria, there's poison, and I need to get rid of this poison. Why can't I just use my transporter and chuck this poison back out into the environment? Well, the problem is that just like how we talked about bacteria being ancient, these transporters are also ancient, and they've been dealing with these same kinds of waste for a long, long time. So just because those transporters have this ability to move things out of the cell, they're not moving everything out of the cell, just the way you don't go around your house throwing everything in the trash. You only want to get rid of waste. And bacteria are the same way. They only want to get rid of things that they don't want, and they want to keep everything else in the cell. So if this transporter doesn't recognize something as waste, for example, this antibiotic that's poisoning you, it won't transport it out of the cell. It will just leave it be. And so even though you have a transporter that can maybe move this poison out, it's not currently doing that. But not all hope is lost, because these transporter proteins are not set in stone in terms of their function, right? Proteins are basically, these machines are built based on a blueprint that is encoded in DNA. And so DNA can accumulate mutations over time. Every time cells divide, there's an opportunity for random mutations in DNA. And any changes in this blueprint can ultimately change how this protein machine is built and assembled, how it looks, how it functions. And so you might just be that lucky bacteria that had like just the right combination of mutations, just the right changes in your blueprint. So now your transporter, this pink one over here, is now suddenly recognizing this antibiotic, the poison, and it's shooting it out into the environment. And that gives you immunity, because now you are just chucking out that poison and you are completely healthy. And now that you have this magic transporter protein that lets you live, you can divide and replicate and make more bacteria that also have the same resistance to the antibiotics. So this creates a whole new subpopulation that can then spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So it's great for you as the bacteria. You are the one who survived, and you can basically repopulate with this resistance. But now let's go back to being ourselves as humans. Knowing that this is how bacteria are dealing with this, it kind of seems silly to just focus on coming up with new antibiotics or just brute forcing it, because this is just going to keep happening. It's a numbers game. It's just odds. So at some point, given this this opportunity, bacteria will be able to, emerge with resistance to whatever antibiotics we throw at them eventually. And so we need to be really smart about how this process more strategy, I would say, and a little more like nuance. And so that's where my job comes in. I'm a scientist at the University of Michigan. And if you've ever been to the Biological Sciences building where the Museum of Natural History is, that's the building I work in. And so what I'm interested in is understanding how these transporters work, and specifically how those ancient transporters work, and then how they change to become antibiotic transporters. And so the way that we do this in our lab is we can actually just order, so we don't have to work with the disease-causing bacteria necessarily. We can actually just order a sequence of DNA, so that blueprint for that codes how to make this protein. We can just order that DNA sequence from a company, give it to a safe strain of lab bacteria, and that bacteria will then read that blueprint that we gave them and just churn out a bunch of the transporter. And we can actually grow these bacteria in these big flasks, make a ton of bacteria with a ton of the transporter, and we can either study how it works in the bacteria, or we can also biochemically extract that transporter and study it on its own. And the kinds of questions we can ask are, how does the cargo specificity change? So if we give it a different blueprint and we have different transporters, we can compare what the ancient ones look like and what the kind of newer antibiotic transporting ones look like, and what actually determines how they're recognizing the specificity. So how do they hold on to something? How do they transport it? So these are all experiments that we can do biochemically. And then we also can look at how the shape of the transporter changes. Keep in mind that these transporter proteins are 3D objects in 3D space, and they move in very intricate dynamic ways between different states. And so part of understanding how that works is we use things like X-rays and electron beams and basically, bombard our protein with these things to try to figure out what they look like on an atomic level. And that can tell us, again, along with the biochemical specificity kind of results, what's happening as these transporters change, as the blueprint is changing to allow proteins to become antibiotic resistance proteins. And we've already shown for certain proteins in our lab that this is less than 10 changes, like 6 or 7 mutations, and it's now an antibiotic transporter. So it really does not take a lot. And so the hope is that by understanding all of this, we can now maybe come up with ways to target these transporters specifically, kind of block them, neutralize them to make bacteria resensitized to the antibiotics. And also this can inform how we come up with new antibiotics so that they're basically harder to evolve a way to transport them. So maybe they're bulkier or they don't really fit through the existing ancient transporters, and it takes more mutations to get them out of the cell. And so these are kinds of things we're thinking about, but hopefully this is a kind of innovative way to think about antibiotic resistance and try to, I think we need everything we have to throw everything we can at this problem. And so that's what I'm doing. And that's it. I'll take any questions. The question was, do bacteria have feelings? I mean, I kind of think they do. I've been working on bacteria for a long time now, and so I kind of anthropomorphize them in my own head. It kind of helps me. I'm like, what do the bacteria want today? How are they feeling today? And so that's what, that's why I gave the talk that way.
We see that in the species that we can see with the naked eye, but that small display.
Great question. Yeah, I don't know if they have feelings we can witness, but I'd like to think so. Yeah.
How many rounds of adaptation evolution does it have to go through before it qualifies as ancient for the purposes of study?
There's not. So the question was how many rounds of evolution does it take for something to be ancient versus not ancient? I'm using that term loosely. I mean, I think if you look at an evolutionary, I mean, really, like we're thinking about how much things have changed from an evolution, because obviously I don't have like a time machine to like pull out the protein that existed in ancient times, but there are proteins that exist now that are more similar to ancient proteins than these newer ones that are changing rapidly to accommodate the challenges of antibiotics, right? And so what we can do is try to find those proteins that have changed very little over time. These tend to be in bacteria that are not human pathogens, so don't cause disease in humans, that are just like living in volcanoes somewhere. And so they have this like ancient function that's basically stayed mostly unchanged, and it's serving a very specific function. Whereas in pathogens that are infecting humans, we tend to see very rapid mutations and changes because they're trying to like adapt to this new pressure of antibiotics.
Is this the only mechanism such that they acquire, they become resistant, or is the predominant mechanism, or is just one of the mechanisms?
Yeah, so the question was, is this the dominant or one of the mechanisms for evolving antibiotic resistance? So there are multiple ways. Obviously, different classes of antibiotics target different things in the cell. So they might target like DNA damage, or they might target the protein translation machinery. But I think what's interesting to me about these transporters is that it's kind of like a catch-all resistance mechanism, right? Because as long as you can transport out the antibiotic, it can work on any class of antibiotic. And what we're seeing is that with some of these mutations, the transporters can do multiple classes of antibiotics all very effectively. And so rather than just mutating what the antibiotic is targeting in the cell, now you can just have like one way that basically gives you resistance to multiple antibiotics. And that's what's like really scary for some of these like MRSA and stuff that are just resistant to everything. Yeah.
Have you worked personally on the bacteria that is frightening?
Have I worked personally on the bacteria that frighten me? I mean, in my PhD, I worked more on like directly on bacterial pathogens. Right now, I don't really, because I mostly just work with like the transporter protein on its own, so it's much less scary. But yeah, I have not worked on the really scary. I know people who do like TB research or something, and they're in like hazmat suits. I have never had to do that, but yeah. Yeah, sure.
Why does the antibiotic resistance change from person to person? Like, is the evolution person specific in the bacteria?
Yeah, so the question is, how does the antibiotic resistance change between people? I think it depends on what the like transmission is, because you can imagine if like the source, so sometimes you'll have overlap between like the protein is maybe developed in like bacteria that are in a certain environment like agriculture or something, or in food processing, and then maybe that transmits to somebody who then picks up that antibiotic resistant bacteria that someone else wouldn't have exposure to. So I think a lot of it's just like transmission and like environmental context for where those bacteria are like reservoirs and how they're being transmitted into people.
We have one more question.
This is probably a non sequitur.
Yeah.
But I keep hearing that we're more and more learning about the human biome, and we have brain cells in our gut, and all these different. How does that relate, if at all, to what you're studying?
Okay, so the question is on the gut-brain axis and kind of the biome and how our microbiome is affecting our health and how this relates to what I talked about today. Not directly, but I would say certainly there's a lot of research on the gut-brain axis. So a lot of our immune system and our brain health is nervous system, all of that is dependent on our microbiome. Everything is interconnected, and a lot of this comes down to balance too. So like, there's a certain balance in your microbiome between like bacteria that are keeping things in check and then bacteria that are trying to overcome that and cause disease, right? So everything is kind of in this perfect harmony, and as soon as that gets thrown off, that's when you have the problems. And so I would say it's not just like the gut microbiome and nothing else. Everything is connected in our bodies. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this can add to the problem, right? So if you already have it thrown off, and then also now those bacteria that you can't fight off yourself also have resistance to all the drugs in our, arsenal of medicine that we can treat with, then you're really like out of options at some point, which is scary.
Thank you, Inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Achala, you had us on a roller coaster. You had me rooting for the bacteria when they were fighting, like seeing their brothers dying from antibiotics. And then you reminded me I'm a human. And then I got nervous. And then you brought me hope. And I'm really glad that you are problem solving this horrifying situation. Best of luck. Godspeed. All right, folks, we're going to take a 5-minute break this time. So run, don't walk. I mean, do walk and grab another drink. Don't forget to tip Mike, the amazing bartender. And then we'll be back for Sexton Life LaFayerson, and the creepy portion of the event will commence. See you in 5.
All right, Nerd Night. We are going to bring it back to our third speaker of the night, third and final, the sexton himself, Leif Lefeierson. Did I get that right? Almost? Yes? Good. Okay, excellent. Leif is going to, first of all, he has a degree in history and has presented at tours, museums, and cemeteries in southeastern Michigan and southeastern France. He has been known to roam the countryside looking for lost cemeteries, usually with success. And he's going to be talking to us tonight a bit about the difference between a cemetery and a graveyard, and talking about a little bit about the goings on in them. So take it away, Sexton Leif Lefeierson.
Hello, Nerd Nite. I'm the Sexton Lefeierson. Sexton is not my name. Sexton is a title. The sexton is the person in the church who took care of the physical aspects of a church, like arranging the pews and putting up the Christmas decorations and burying dead bodies. There we go. That's me. Okay. People have told me that death can be a depressing subject, and people have told me that people don't like being depressed. So I'm going to give you two positive takeaways tonight. And the first one is the idea that grief is love with nowhere to go. This is not true, of course. Grief is far more complicated than that, but it was helpful to me, and it might be helpful to you. So just stick with me for 20 minutes and see if you find it useful. I didn't find that it reduced my pain when I was grieving for my cat who passed away in December of last year, but I did find that it helped me accept that pain as being based on love and therefore a good thing. So, as far as I can tell, grief or funerary customs have three purposes. This is my personal definitions here. The first one is to help the living face their own mortality. If I can build a really big monument to myself and I can keep my physical remains intact, I can live forever and I won't really die. The pyramids of Egypt is an excellent example of that. The pyramids of Egypt were actually plundered in antiquity, just as a note. The second reason for funeral customs is sanitation. Sometimes that takes a back seat. We'll get more into that later. And the third one is, I feel, to give that love someplace to go. So if you are grieving, you feel that person isn't really dead because I spent lots of money on a beautiful monument, and because their remains are still in the ground and they're being preserved and I've taken care of them. We'll see. The beginning. So what were funerary customs like in prehistory? In Europe, at least, which is the context of what this is talking about, not that other ones aren't important, they're just all we have time for and the most relevant to this country. The burial customs were decided by the family, and where and how the physical remains of a person were determined by the clan, and it was varied. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. Then along comes Christianity, and they said, you know what? That afterlife that you're afraid of, that is really, really horrible, that all your poets tell you is awful, you actually have a solution to that, is if you join Christianity, and you can have a really cushy afterlife. But one of the conditions of that afterlife is that if you bury your dead in sacred ground, which is in the yard of a church or a graveyard. Now, most people could not afford a permanent monument in a churchyard or a graveyard. Most people were buried in a mass grave, and then once their flesh had rotted away, their bones were placed in what is called an ossuary. This is the Paris catacombs where those remains were left. All of these are just simply people who are too poor to afford an actual grave, and that's the vast majority of people. Okay, this was accepted until the 18th century. Overcrowding, and then graveyards started becoming overcrowding, and that caused several problems, one of which was overcrowding. Exposed graveyards was what exposed corpses became an issue as one corpse was stacked on top of another, and eventually they just ran out of room, which made grave robbing a lot easier. So this is not really a problem if you are a grave robber or a medical student. Disagreeable odors was another problem with the graveyard system, right? The stench was actually epic. If you can imagine hundreds of corpses exposed to the open air, you noticed it. Walking past a graveyard wasn't just creepy because it was spooky, it really, really, really stank. The last, or another one was when it rained. Graveyard juice, this is copyrighted by the way, nobody used this without my permission, would leak into the groundwater and cause disease, which then added to the overcrowding of the graveyards. Lastly, people of quote unquote dissenting religions could not bury their dead in a graveyard because that was limited to one specific religion. So for example, Catholic places of worship were illegal in England until the late 18th century. So if somebody dies, what are you going to do with your dead? Is a little bit awkward, right? Okay, this is an example of what the graveyard system resulted in. You can see people up here, they're partying, and people downstairs are sleeping. I don't know what it would have been like to have been up here smelling what's down here, but apparently this was a thing for a really long time. Eventually, people said, enough, we got to change the laws. First, cemeteries. Cemetery is consecrated. So what a cemetery is a consecrated ground built, but is not physically attached to a churchyard. It is under the control of a private organization. Frequently, it is further from the middle of the population centers. So one of the biggest concerns was health. So they moved it far away from where people were living. And multiple denominations could have been found in the same cemetery. Here it is laid out for you side by side. Graveyards, physically attached to a church, serves only one religion. It's consecrated ground, and only the very wealthy could actually be afforded to be buried in a graveyard. If you're fabulously wealthy, you could be buried in the church itself, but that takes a lot of money. A cemetery, by contrast, is owned by a private company, serves multiple religions, although they will be divided up into different sections. And it is still consecrated ground, but the monuments are available to many. So that is one thing that did happen, that cemeteries were very, very equalizing. Okay, this is one of my favorite cemeteries, or one of the most interesting cemeteries that I think, Brookwood Cemetery. It was placed so far outside of London that it is still outside of London. London is so big that it is actually in a different county. It's still London, but it's a different county. Brookwood is still outside of that. It allowed permanent resting places for many people who are financially unable to afford burials in graveyards. And it had its own rail line. And this is an example of a ticket that you would buy. So if you had less money than your average person, or less money in general, it was cheaper to bury your loved one in Brookwood Cemetery and take a ticket out to the cemetery and then come back than it would be to bury them inside the city. This is their coat of arms. I love how the Victorian in-the-face acceptance of death is here. You have the skull and crossbones. Yes, you are going to die. This is true. The hourglass with the sand head has run out. Yes, this is the fate that we're all waiting for. And this is actually, even though it looks scary, that snake is actually one of the nicest things on here. It means immortality. It's the worm Orobus, and it means immortality and rebirth. And then this motto here means peace to the dead, and health to the living. So they're advertising the health benefits of cemeteries right on their coat of arms there. Okay, let's talk about, there are many types of cemeteries, but we're going to talk about my favorite type, which is the garden cemetery. Père Lachaise in France is considered to be the first one, and that opened in 1802. Jim Morrison, Oscar Wilde, and Sarah Bernhardt are residents there. Everyone knows who Sarah Bernhardt is, right? Ah, yes, good. I'm glad you all do. Excellent. Glad to hear that. The Magnificent Seven. You've heard that phrase before, right? Yes, that's because you all know that there were 7 graveyards or cemeteries in London, right? No? Oh, okay. All right, go figure. So there were 7 cemeteries created in London to solve this overcrowding problem. They were all built in 1833 to 1941. Brookwood Cemetery is one of them. Highgate Cemetery is another one. Highgate has Karl Marx, the painter Dante Gabriele Rossetti, and it was featured in Sherlock Holmes. If any of you want to rewatch that film with me, I love that film. It's a really great scene in the beginning. Mount Auburn is the oldest maintained cemetery in the United States. I want to be very careful that it's maintained cemetery. There are plenty of older cemeteries, but they haven't been maintained consistently. So the United States is very, very fond of private family cemeteries because we were like the wild, wild west where we had no law, so the church had less control. So we have a lot of cemeteries that are not maintained, but Mount Auburn is the oldest. Highland Cemetery in Ypsilanti is a great example of a garden cemetery. You can get a tour by, where'd he go? James Mann, there he is. You can get a tour by James Mann. The fee is $10 per head, no charge for the rest of the body. That's his joke. So that's going on till the end of December. Forest Hill Cemetery in Ann Arbor is also a fantastic example of a garden cemetery. You know it? Yeah. Have you ever been buried there before? No? Okay. Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit is a beautiful example of a garden cemetery. It has a river, which makes it a very fun place to go. So let's talk about what features of a garden cemeteries. There's many types of cemeteries. These are features that belong to a garden cemetery. They're designed to be beautiful places of contemplation and reflection. So you're supposed to think of the divine and peace and your loved one while you're there. They have rolling hills, winding paths, flora, and elaborate funerary furniture created to sorry, what did I say here? Created to that's designed. You have a constantly changing vista. If you go 100 feet, you're going to see a completely different view. And it's designed to be attractive to the living. So in an era when death was really common, people frequently would go to the cemetery and say have meals and visit their loved ones. These places were so attractive that even if you didn't have a relative that had passed away, you would come and have a meal there anyways. So picnics and just kind of like hang out happened a lot in these garden cemeteries. They were so popular that they actually are the impetus for the creation of public parks. So if you go to a public park, just think, hey, it's like I'm in a cemetery, but there's no dead people. These are pictures of Forest Hill cemeteries. The pictures, can you see these okay? If you can't, they're fantastic in person. Just trust me on that one. But if you can't see them, we can't kill any more lights, can we? No, okay. So maybe you can, maybe you can't see that there's lots of plants. Sometimes you'll see cemeteries without very many plants. There's lots of trees. And you can see that if you walk 100 feet around whoever this guy is, it's definitely not me. You can see that you'd see a completely different vista. So this is an example of people visiting a cemetery for funsies. I don't know if this was all completely I don't know if every day was like this. I seriously doubt it, but you can see that it's very, very crowded, right? I've never seen a cemetery today that looks like this. This is what I think is one of the most beautiful examples. This is Forest Hill Cemetery again. This bench right here, there's 2 stones. I believe one of them's empty. But they say, thank you for visiting our bench. They don't care who you are. They don't care if you're one of their family members or not. They just want to share their space with you. That's a beautiful idea. That's a beautiful example of what a cemetery or a garden cemetery is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about sharing beauty and thinking about the divine. Okay, cemeteries do have their faults as well. They're maintained. They're dependent on private corporations for their maintenance. Highgate Cemetery, the famous one in London, went bankrupt in World War II, and it fell into ruin. Ultimately, if you think about it, we'll run out of space for cemeteries, and the world will be just nothing but one giant cemetery. Which, as a goth, I would love that, but I don't think most people would. So, some of the solutions are cremation, memorial gardens, which I'll talk about later, and natural burials. Natural burials are cemeteries where they just put you in the ground, they let you rot. In 100 years, they return the land back for use to the living. How comfortable are you with that? Yeah, kind of ambivalent feelings, right? Yeah. Personally, I'm a fan, but that's just me. Okay, this is Highgate Cemetery. If you look at some of the monuments are very well maintained. You can see there's still flowers, and I don't know what these white rocks are about, but I saw them a lot when I was there. But this is the condition of most of Highgate Cemetery. These monuments were not cheap. So if you think about it, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how to feel about it, but they spent a lot of money to maintain, to put up these monuments, and that's the condition that they're in right now. This is a memorial garden that is off of Packard Road. If you don't know what a memorial garden is, there are actually no bodies here. This is Mr. Tarun, this is his wife, and this is their child, or at least that's their stones. When they had to move the stones in 1910, and they looked at the remains and they said, we can't move these, so we're just gonna move the stones. So it's just a memorial garden. So this is one of the disadvantages. Americans really, really liked the private family cemetery, but one of the disadvantages of that is that as soon as you ran out of mourners, you would forget where it was and it would get lost. We'll get more into that later. But there's actually a lot of cemeteries in the United States. A lot of them are small, and a lot of them have fallen into disuse. But there are so many cemeteries in America, even in Washtenaw County. I'm actually willing to bet, I have this stack of cash on me. I'm actually willing to bet that nobody can guess how many cemeteries there are in Washtenaw County. If you can, I will give you this money. What? 120, yeah, 122 you said. That is correct. Come get your money. I'm not really sure how he knew that, but anyways, that's a lot of cemeteries, right? All right, you can't win them all. So this is a cemetery with dozens of burials. If you can see here, there is nothing. This is a monument that you can kind of see still here, but that is actually a cemetery. This is a monument. You can see the monument that before, and you can see the other monument here. And that's pretty much all you can see of that cemetery. It's reputed that there's a warlock that lives there because there was a tree that grew up around his grave. So I don't really talk about it very much because teenagers like to vandalize it. But this happens a lot because as soon as you run out of mourners, as soon as people forget, as soon as you stop burying people here, the last burial here was in 1910, people stop maintaining it. So that brings me to my positive takeaway for the evening. I would like you all to think of somebody that you care about, somebody that you love. You want them to be happy, I hope. Is that going to change when you pass away? I really hope the answer is no again. So these are two people that have passed away that I miss very much. And it gives me pain to see them because it reminds me of that pain with nowhere to go. But I know that they don't want me to be sad. So when we're talking about honoring the dead, you certainly can express that love with nowhere to go by buying them a monument, preserving the remains, whatever it is that you want to feel like you want to do. But remember, they don't want you to be sad. They want you to be happy. So the best way in my mind to honor the dead is to be happy. And I'm going to ask each and every one of you, for the honor of your ancestors, do something that makes you happy. Thank you. I can take questions.
Yeah.
So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yes. You know, I haven't looked into the laws. Every time I've done that, it hasn't really been under surveillance of an official of the law. I've said too much. I'm sorry. They are legal, or else they wouldn't happen. But I don't know if they're legal in every state or not. I just know it's one of those. It's an evolution in the funerary industry. I'm sorry. What's that? Oh, sorry. Thank you. The question was, are natural barriers legal everywhere? So I know they have to be legal some places, or else they wouldn't happen at all. But with whether or not they're legal in every state, I don't know. It totally sounds like a California thing. Yes. She said she thought in California that it was legal there, but yeah, if it was going to be legal anywhere, it'd be California. Yeah. Do I have a favorite local cemetery? I mean, I would say it's very interesting because Forest Hill Cemetery is fantastic, but I actually prefer Highland Cemetery in Ypsilanti, partially because it is one of the few, if not the only places where Civil War soldiers that are black and white are actually buried together. Yeah. It is also at the time that it was popular in the 19th century, Ypsilanti had as much as or more money, so the monuments are actually about as nice or more or are nicer. So yeah, so Highland Cemetery, which I keep on wanting to say to Highgate, like in London, but yeah, that's my favorite. Yes, ma'am. It definitely is, but go ahead. You've gone halfway there. She's saying, is this too personal of a question? I would like my cats to eat me, and then I would like to have my bones buried I'd like them buried in France somewhere in Paris. But no, I want a natural burial because my personal opinion, and I am not pushing this on anybody, is that once you pass away, this has nothing to do with your person. So I want it to return to the earth and then not cause any damage. That's my personal opinion. I'm not judging anybody else for what they think. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So there are all those forgotten cemeteries, and when you're walking
122 of them, yes. There's all those forgotten cemeteries, she said.
and when you're walking around, you can barely tell that they're a cemetery. It's in some ways sad because they're forgotten, but in other ways there are no mourners left. What do you feel like is the ethical way as a society to handle all of those forgotten cemeteries? Do you leave them be? Do you restore them in some way? Do you turn them into public parks, bonus with dead bodies?
That is an awesome question. Yeah, she's saying that if the forgotten cemeteries, what is the ethical thing to do with them? Do you restore them? Do you try to recover those gravestones? Right? Is that what you're saying? Or do you just let them return to the earth? And the question, my answer is I am not. I'm pretty arrogant, but I'm not arrogant enough to answer that question. So I really don't know. My personal opinion would be to let them return to the earth, but I don't know if that is the right answer. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, amazing speakers, everyone. Thank you so much. Folks, welcome back to Thursday nights, Nerd Night. I hope we'll see you again next time. Go ahead. Yeah, one more round of applause for the speakers. All right. I framed that up poorly. Huge thanks to Life, to Achala, to Greg. You guys were fantastic. I learned a lot. I laughed. I was terrified. I was sad. And then I felt hope. You guys, what a journey. We're going to do it all again in 1 month's time, November 9th, Thursday again, right back here at Live. We've got great speakers, okay? I've got a PhD student who's going to tell you about microplastics. You've heard about these in the water. Get ready for them to come in through your lungs. They're in the air, baby. It's amazing. You got to hear her talk about it. And then we've got a neuroscientist who is going to talk some spit, as in saliva, but I don't remember what about it. So I just thought I would make a joke about what it rhymes with. I know it's cheap. And then we have sociologist Matthew Facciani is going to come and tell you how to have productive political conversations. Yes, just in time for Thanksgiving. Take that, Grandpa. So you don't want to miss it. You definitely want to be there for it. You will finally win the argument. Thanks again to everyone. Thanks to you all for coming out, and we will see you next time. Have a good night.